and then we can go.
Hello, we have a special treat with Bryan from Quest for Faith, from a YouTube channel that is doing phenomenal work for building the glory of Christ's kingdom here on earth. And he has a great story of how he was filled with faith in the Church of Christ Church. And then he, with his wife, moved into the Catholic Church, and they are on fire for their love for God. And I'm looking forward to this story, and I'm hoping that you can join me along.
Right.
Hi, Bryan.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing great. I'm excited for this. And
Yeah.
just before we start, he also has merchandise that he recently launched on his channel, Quest for Faith. So definitely check that out. He's a fascinating character, and he has many videos that have been helping a lot of people.
Well, thank you. And honestly, it's one of those things where with making these videos, you kind of go, "Oh, do I really need to keep doing, or I don't feel like I'm doing making an impact. I'm not doing anything." And you'll see like one comment and you're like, okay, no, it's cool. I hit one person, I'm gonna keep going. That's kind of my what constantly happens to me doing in this space of YouTubing. So
Even if it shifts one soul, that's good.
it's
It's
worth all the hours.
we can, some people fertilize, some people seed, some people sow, but it's the Holy Spirit's job to keep sanctifying and bringing people into the love of God. So Bryan, let's hear how it all started for you. You can start wherever you begin, wherever you'd like.
Yeah, so yeah, we can start from the beginning. So I grew up in a regular church going home. So I grew up Church of Christ, which um, for those that might not be familiar with Church of Christ, it's definitely on the fundamentalist side of Protestantism, and it's really a quick history lesson. It really it started in the 1820s, 1830s, in a movement to kind of, the idea was to knock off all the man-made stuff and get down to brass tacks and unify Christians. And it didn't necessarily work out that way. But so there's a number of different denominations that came out of this movement in the 1820s, and Church of Christ was one of them. And so the Church of Christ, one of the things that whenever I'd invite somebody to church when I was a kid, they would always be shocked because we never had instruments. So we would always sing a cappella. There was no instruments in church, but everything, I mean, obviously now being Catholic, I don't agree with this, but was based off biblical teachings, right? Even everything that they did, the reason they don't have instruments in church was there's no example of that in the New Testament of them praising God with instruments. And
Oh,
so,
so it wasn't about the Old Testament because they had heart, like
right,
David played the. Okay.
right. And so it was things like that. But scripture was a massive thing for me growing up. And so, I learned all the Bible stories and going to Sunday school. And, it was a great time growing up because we go to church on Sunday morning. And then I would typically, a lot of times, either invite a friend from church back over to my house for the rest of Sunday, or I'd go over to their house. And then we'd have church Sunday night. So it was easy, like you didn't have to go drop kid off. Everybody would be back at church Sunday night. And then we'd have church on Wednesday night. And then that was typically my schedule and all throughout my entire childhood growing up. So it was a very, God was always part of my life. And so there wasn't necessarily a time where I ever questioned it. And even in the, we'll get to that part, but even to the darker times when life was hard, it still wasn't a question of whether, that Christ wasn't real or that I didn't believe in God, but it was more of where was my emphasis in that. So, but yeah, growing up, it was, most of my good friends were from church until junior high and high school. So I moved from Northern California down to Southern California, and I was living in Thousand Oaks for junior high and high school. And that's when most of my friends were from school and not church. And I don't know. I was your typical teenage kid. So, but I was still going to church, but I was definitely, going to parties, drinking, all that kind of stuff, playing football, doing all those sports things, chasing girls, the normal things. But even in high school, I would do my friends and I would go to Young Life. And I don't know if they have that in Canada, but
I don't know Young Life.
okay, so like Young Life is a non-denominational organization, so they're not attached to anyone, but it's more about bringing the message, the gospels to high schoolers. And they would have meetings once a week, and it'd basically be a devotional in the most Protestant sense of the word, where we'd come in and it'd be nothing but high school kids, and the leaders would be there'd be one or two adult leaders, but then most of the leaders would be college kids. And so we'd sing a bunch of songs. Some of them, a few were worship songs, but most of them were secular type songs, and we'd play the guitar and sing, and then there'd be like a quick little Bible lesson, and then we'd hang out and have fun. And so for me, like most of my friends in high school weren't regular churchgoers. And so I was kind of the odd one that like I wasn't learning anything new, right? It was like, oh yeah, I know all this stuff, but I get to hang out with my buddies. There's cute girls here. Let's keep going.
So
And
this was in
so
public schools, young
yeah,
leaders.
so they weren't part of the school system, but it was I don't know how they would do their advertising to get kids to come.
Mm.
Because even in California, like you couldn't go like I don't know, like you would get invited from other high schoolers, like, hey, you got to come to Young Life, it's totally fun. And we would go, and like it would be games and just a fun time for an hour, and a little Bible lesson for 10 minutes at the end, like nothing huge, right? Like it's more of introducing the idea. And then you would go to camp every summer, which would be a ton of fun, but you'd stay in cabins and you'd go and do a bunch of outdoor stuff, play some games, and that was a lot more like learning about the Bible, learning about Jesus, that type of stuff. And so I did that through high school, and I became a leader my freshman year of college, and would play the guitar and do the singing for the what did they call them? They didn't call them meetings. I forget what it was called. I can't even remember now, but that was forever ago. This we're talking like 1999, 1998. So it was a little bit ago.
Yeah.
Uh and but it was kind of interesting during that time because I was having a really hard time. I had a pretty rough second half of my senior year.
Hmm.
And really due to my I don't even know if I've told this part of it, but my sister was dating one of my buddies. My sister's only 15 months younger than me, so we
Really
had all the
close
same
sisters.
friends,
Yeah.
right? And
You and my
not
brother
that
are
it
the
was
same.
funny because we had the same friends, but it's not like even today we're not close, but we don't like we don't have like animosity, but we're so different that it's kind of like we don't fit, if that makes sense. But
It does, yeah.
so she was dating one of my buddies, and it was great. It was fine. And then she breaks up with him out of the blue. And we're like, why did you break up with him? That makes no sense. But she wasn't telling us because he started smoking weed again, and she really didn't like that. And so she broke up with him. And this ended up being like this massive thing because he did not take it well. And she started pretty quickly dating her now husband. And it ended up getting to like I had to fight him because
Oh,
he was
wow.
trying to attack my now brother-in-law and my sister, and I had to step in, and so I had this massive just I was in the center of a big friend group, the whole football team. Like, yes, I was like in the popular crowd, and then all of a sudden I wasn't, because apparent that people were picking sides on, I can't believe you did that to him, and or then people would come up to me like, that guy's a jerk. Good job on sticking up for your sister. Like it was a thing. And so that was kind of like the end of my senior year going into college. And I
Mhm.
decided to do the young life thing. And at the time, I was dating a girl I shouldn't have been dating. And that really had an impact on me too. And so I was really having a hard time squaring my personal life with my faith.
Mhm.
And so I get through college and or my freshman year of college, and I'm and please stop me whenever you want to stop. But
Okay.
if you have more questions. But that following summer, I decided to volunteer at a Young Life camp. So I was going to spend a week as a leader, bringing the high school kids that I was mentoring up to a camp in Oregon. Yeah, in Oregon. Spend a week there, and then I would fly down to Northern California, and I stayed a month at this other camp where I was a cook for a summer. And so the reason I mentioned that is kind of it adds to the story. I had been I'd gone to junior college my freshman year, and I was just ready to get out of my hometown. Like, you know how that is. Like, I need to
Mhm.
leave. But you grew up in a small town. Like, Thousand Oaks is not a small town. It feels small, but it's not. It's like
It's that
literally,
feeling that you just outgrow it and you just need to move on.
yes.
You don't have a negative perception about your home, and I feel that about my university town too. It's a great city. I feel just called to go elsewhere
Yes.
and be start fresh.
100%. Yeah, that's exactly where I was at. And so I'm applying to all these schools, and my mom, the night before I was leaving to be gone for over a month, was like, "You need to apply to Abilene Christian University." And so this is a big Church of Christ college in the center of Texas, in Abilene, Texas. And I didn't know anything about it. I knew my grandfather went there, and he is a Church of Christ preacher. And so I was like, fine, I'll apply.
Okay.
And so I applied literally the night before I'm leaving, and I go and I have a great time. Like, I'm still dealing with a lot of emotion. I don't know, like I was super emotional, but I was still dealing with stuff personally when I was there.
And this is
And
like a big time, well-known kind of a college that teaches you
it's not a big time. Like within Church of Christ,
yeah,
yes, but I mean, I think they're finally Division 1 as far as college rankings go, but at the time, like it's only 5,000 students or so that go to school there,
yeah, and
but
it
it's really strict. And
okay.
so like you have to be on the faculty, you have to be a Church of Christ member to be on the faculty. So like their faith is taken really seriously. But I didn't know any of that stuff when I applied. So I'm at camp, and my parents call and they're like, "Hey, you got accepted, but you need to do an entrance interview over the phone." And so I did it. It went fine. And the week I have to make my decision whether I'm going to move to Texas from California or not, I there's literally a group of kids from Abilene, Texas in at this camp in California. And
Oh,
I'm like, that has to be a sign. Like, I
oh,
guess I'm going to Abilene. And so I call and say, yes, I'm going. And I literally came home for 2 weeks, packed my stuff, and left. Like, I didn't even, none of my friends at home knew. Like, and so I even had people calling me and emailing me afterwards, like, where are you? I thought we were going to take the same classes this fall together. And I'm like, oh, yeah,
by the
I
way,
moved to Texas. And they're like, what? Like, why would you do that? And, um,
didn't get a chance to say goodbye and,
yeah,
yeah.
it was and literally I was kind of running, if that makes sense. I was just kind of all the turmoil I'd been going through over the last year, it was just kind of me. I think I was running is what I was doing. And so I get there, and I don't know about all these rules, like no girls in your dorm, like no drinking, no tobacco products, like super strict. They have chapel every single day that you have to go to, and it's more of a devotional chapel where they're singing songs. There might be some announcements, and then there's like a sermon. And And like you have to badge in, like you get credit for going to chapel and you can't miss chapel.
Oh,
And
wow, you
so,
get credit for it.
yeah, like it wasn't college credit, but you got in trouble if you missed so many chapels in one semester.
So you were
S-
just running from your old life, from all the turmoil, and so you didn't have time to research what you were going into,
No. And
but
I
you just
show up and I'm like, I have more rules now than I did at home. Like, what the? And you have to take, I knew you had to take Bible. And so I had to take, you take 12 hours of Bible, I think. But since I was coming in as a sophomore, I think I had to take 9. And it was okay. Like, I'm glad I went to a Christian university because I think if I would have gone to like a public university, it would have been really bad for me. Like, I think I would have just partied so hard, it would have been ridiculous because I was in that rebellion phase. Like, I remember hating authority and just getting really mad about everything. Um, but it was cool that even though, yes, I was still partying in college and I was doing good in school, it wasn't like I was getting straight A's, but I was B average. Um, to still be kind of surrounded by people that were Christians was a good thing. And it was different for me being coming from California and being one of the only Christians out of my friend group, or serious Christians. I'm not going to say that, but serious Christian, one of the only ones to, wow, now I'm surrounded by people that's at least they might go drinking Saturday night, but they're in church Sunday morning, right? Like
yeah.
at least they have it's part of their life and maybe just more of identity than, you know. And
That
so
have a huge impact on your friend group and just how 'cause we become who we hang out with.
yeah, that is 100% true. And I think I was always having to defend the faith all the time when I was, and I think I got tired of that. Like I felt this burden of having, like and for those that I just finished interviewing her, but it was the same deal where I felt this obligation to be the goody two shoes Christian that knew the faith, that I was the one that people came to if they had questions at Young Life or Bible and even in high school. And it was too much for me at the time because I didn't know everything, right? And I was just having a really hard time dealing with that. And it was kind of during this time I would say was the first bitterness I felt for people that were really serious about their faith.
Hmm. Oh,
Uh,
why is that?
it was kind of the kids that were in the Bible department, were very snooty and would look down on anyone that would go out and drink or do anything outside. And yes, I was doing all that, but at the same time, I'm looking at it going, yeah, but he loved us still, right? And you guys aren't being gracious and you're being more like, how dare you versus, hey man, you shouldn't be doing that. Why don't we come and we can hang out and play some video games instead of go out to a party? Like it was just bothering me. And
Mhm.
so I graduate, and at the time, my senior year, I was dating this girl that she moved back to Dallas, and I thought we were going to get back together. So I started looking for jobs in Dallas, and Dallas is about 3 hours away from Abilene, and I get a job, but by then that ain't happening, and so I moved to Dallas, don't know anybody, and I just kind of fall in with people from work, and I found a church that I was going to, and I'd go sporadically. Like probably twice a month I'd
Yeah.
go.
Church of Christ still?
Yeah, Church of Christ. And there's tons of them in Dallas in the South. So it wasn't hard to find. And fast forward a few years, I meet my wife and she grew up Methodist, which is more mainline, right? Like they're not fundamentalists. They have bishops, they have structure, they kind of um if you go to a traditional Methodist, it's still very Protestant. It's not Catholic at all. It's not like how you can go to an Anglican church that's going to be very Catholic like. It's not like that. But it's more mainline Protestant.
Okay.
And but we start dating, and she's freaked out that I'm Church of Christ because I guess Church of Christ don't have a good reputation with other Protestant groups.
But do you mind if I ask why? Why are you the
Because of
what?
the strong fundamentalist beliefs, like a lot of like I just did an interview on a Church of Christ channel, and they literally one of the guys is like, "So I understand that you were used to be part of the body of Christ. So like
Oh,
anyone that's not Church of Christ, they don't think are
he's
Christian."
no longer a body of Christ. Oh, so
Right.
all of our brothers and sisters who have been baptized in it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what denomination, Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant.
Yeah. Like the hard line Church of Christ, that's their viewpoint. And they also think that they are the first century church.
Oh,
So
isn't it like the 1800s?
it is,
Okay.
but yeah, because they're trying to mimic what the way they worship God in the Bible is their mindset. And
Okay.
so you'll hear that. And that was kind of the first crack in my armor with going Church of Christ was that. Cause I'm like, that doesn't square up. Like, that's weird. Not that I had studied church history or anything like that, but it just didn't sit right.
Mhm.
Um, so we can fast forward a little bit. So my wife and I get married. We're going to a Church of Christ church, and it's fine. It's great. Like I'm even leading Bible studies at work at lunch. Like I'm still kind of really into everything, and we're meeting some other young couples that everyone's starting a family. Like it's really great. And so this is around like 2006, 2007, 2008. And at the time, I've always worked in the mortgage industry or the finance industry. And I end up getting laid off twice because of the mortgage collapse in '08. And the second time when they announced that our whole division was going to be shut down, I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with the mortgage industry. I'm going to go get my master's in communications and I'm going to go be a professor. Like that's what I want to do. And so um my wife, poor thing, supported me with going back to Abilene. And at this point, we're a young family. We have my oldest, who's just turned 17, was almost two at the time, or one. Um, yeah, I think he was one. Um, and we moved back to Abilene for me to get my master's. And it was the master's part was fantastic. Everything else was awful.
Oh.
We were so broke while we were living there. I was donating plasma to buy groceries. Like I was working as a banker, but not making any money and going to work full time, going to school full time. And it got to the point where you would think so. Abilene's about 100,000 people, and there's probably 40 Church of Christ churches in this little town.
Oh, wow.
And then
Okay.
there's probably that many Baptist churches. And then there's a few Methodist churches. There's probably a Catholic church there. I don't know. I'm sure there is, but I wouldn't have even looked that up at the time. So you would think I would be able to find a church that would fit for my wife and I. And it just never happened. Like there would be something weird about all of them. And I'd go to the big ones that have like 1,000, 2,000 members. And I just felt like they were pandering to everybody, right? Like
And
they were
they
losing.
varied between? So there's
Yeah.
not like
So
one uniform theology, or how
that's
did they
kind
do
of.
it?
So Church of Christ is very anti authority. And so there's no connection between the Church of Christ. Like they have their basic tenets, I would say. Like they do communion every Sunday. They sing a cappella. They're totally Bible sola scriptura. But there's variations between them. And they're slight. And so you don't know until you go for a few Sundays and maybe go to some Bible classes. And then you go, oh, wait, no, I'm not going to this one. This one's a little weird. I'll go over to this next one.
So what
And
kind
so,
of things were weird to you, given that you had grown up in this environment?
well, it was one of the early ones. And I still kind of feel this way sometimes with Catholic stuff. But I remember being shocked that they let a woman do announcements
Mm,
because that was a big thing that like it was always men leading in service. So it'd be men, like there'd be women in the praise and worship team if you had one. Um, that would be like a small choir. It'd be like 4 or 5 people, right? That would be singing to lead the church. Most Church of Christ churches would have a guy that would lead the singing, and then they'd have projectors with the words, and it's I still miss that a little bit because everybody would know their parts, and so you'd have the altos and sopranos, and you'd have the bass, and everybody would sing their different parts, and it's really beautiful if you have a church that can sing.
yeah. Eastern
um
rites like that, Eastern Rite
okay, yeah, so yeah, and it's gorgeous, but I remember being shocked at that, and I'm like, why are they doing that? And then I remember there was just some arguments my wife and I were having on a theological basis because she grew up Methodist. And so
Mm,
we could never agree on a church. And I didn't want us to go to 2 different churches. I wanted us to go to one church. And so we were there for 3 years trying to figure this out. And towards the end, we were so broke and destitute. Like it took an extra year to get my master's done than I thought it was going to. And my wife was like, I need you home. Like, I can't have you working 8 hours, then going to school for 4 hours at night, and then being studying after that. And then, I mean, I was burning a candle on both ends during this time. And so, I decide like, okay, fine. I won't go get a PhD. I'll go ahead and we'll figure out where we're gonna move. And so I email all my buddies that are ex coworkers in Dallas, and I get a job at where I'm currently working. And so we had to move in 2 weeks, and we moved back to Dallas, the same area that we were at before. And so I'm like, great, we'll just go back to the church we were going to before when we moved to Abilene. And I went back and I was just like, I don't feel at home here. Like I thought
mm.
it would be like a coming home type deal.
Yeah, like you're familiar with it, so it's something
Right.
you
And I
can
didn't. And it just didn't feel right. And I think at this point, my wife was pretty much done with Church of Christ, with the really fundamentalist side of it. Cause she's like, this isn't right. Like some of the stuff you guys believe doesn't make sense. Like the whole deal with, I heard you were part of the body of Christ. Like that type of sentiment was really rubbing her the wrong way. Um,
'Cause they if she was Methodist, then they didn't consider her body of Christ?
right. Until we joined Church of Christ. And they
Oh,
don't baptize babies either. And so that was a big fight with us with my oldest son. Uh, and so like they'll do baby dedications, but they don't baptize children. So to be baptized, you have to make the decision. And
I heard that
so,
one of the arguments in the early church, forget where I read this, is that some people were very, according to the old custom, so they fought to have because baptism is the new circumcision.
right.
So they said, "You can't get baptized earlier than 8 days." But because of high infant mortality, Christians wanted it before 8 days. Like, why not right away?
Yeah, and that because that's in the
But now it
I
seems like in
what
a
is it
lot of,
called?
like,
It
the
was like the
modern.
early catechism that was written in like the 60s, 70s.
Mhm.
It starts with a D. Diacronym, something like that.
Didache?
Didache.
Yeah,
It's in the Didache where it says baptize an infant as soon as possible.
yeah.
And so that was kind of like
Settled
which
the matter.
yeah, that's kind of where yeah, but it makes sense that you would if it's an extension of Judaism, which it is, right? I mean, our Christian faith is it's the fulfillment of the Jewish faith, that it would make sense if this is the new covenant, is baptism, the sign of the new covenant. Why wouldn't you? You would circumcise your child at 8 days. So that's the sign of the old covenant. So baptize them. And that made a lot of logical sense when I was looking into baptism later on. But yeah, so and the Church of Christ argument is for that is there's no concrete examples of infants being baptized, right?
No, well,
Like
they
the
baptized whole households.
I know, but it doesn't say infants. And I'm like, but it doesn't say those of age, right? Like
Yeah.
anyways, but that's the reason. And so that really bothered her that we didn't baptize my oldest. And so yeah, it was things like that.
Mhm.
And so but during this is like 2012 was a really rough year. So we moved back in the fall of 2011. 2012, we had a miscarriage. My grandfather died. Like things were not good. Like we were living in this small apartment. And I mean, it wasn't a small apartment. Looking back, it was a nice apartment, but we were in an apartment where we felt like we were taking a step back because we owned a home when we moved to Abilene and we sold it to go back to school. Um, and and I just had this. I think I was just done. Like I was so mad about my life, what was happening. There was some. We were kind of realizing at the time that like my oldest had autism, but we didn't know it yet, so that
Mhm.
was difficult. Um, And I don't remember this conversation, but she told me that we had a conversation where I said, I don't think I'm ever going back to church. Not that I don't believe, but I'm just done. Like I'm done church shopping. I'm done trying this. I'm just sick of this.
You're exhausted, and so maybe
Yeah.
you said it, but when people are tired spiritually, emotionally, financially, everything just seems struggling, right? You had deaths and things that
Yeah.
people say things that you might not remember later.
Right. But she remembers that. And I was like, I said that? She's like, yeah, you said it. Uh, and so we weren't going to church. And this didn't last that long. This probably lasted maybe a month or two, maybe 3, 4, or 5 months, maybe 6 at the most. And I knew that I needed to go to church. Like it had always been part of my life, and I needed it. And so we started church shopping again, and we ended up landing at a Methodist church. Like we went to Presbyterian, we went to Anglican, um, we went to a bunch of different services, and we finally landed at this Methodist church. Oh, I forgot. I told you I was going to tell you my only weird spiritual experience that I've had. Um, so it was during this period of time where I didn't want to go to church when this happened. So it was Ash Wednesday, and Methodists do Ash Wednesday, and they do like I was so ignorant because of Church of Christ that I didn't even know what how am I going blank on it? Not Lent. Um
Advent, Christmas?
Advent. Thank you. I didn't even know what Advent was because we don't do Advent in Church of Christ.
Mhm.
And so
Well,
like I
it's
got
smart. Advent, the words aren't used in the New Testament, so how would
right.
you know?
Well, and I'd get Advent chocolate calendars from my grandma. And of course,
Okay.
I was a kid and I would just open them all up and eat the chocolate. Um, but I didn't know what it was, right? And so, but anyway, so this is that same year where it's 2012 and I'm just adamant I'm not going back to church. And it's Ash Wednesday. And my wife goes, we're going to Ash Wednesday. Like we need to go. And I said, Okay, fine, we'll go." And there was this Anglican church that was right next to the near the apartments we were going to or we were living in. And so we go to this Anglican, and it's a high Anglican, so it's very Catholic-esque, right? Like the incense, everything,
High church.
procession. It's very high church. And I can't explain it to this day, but as soon as the service started, I had this uncontrollable rage that came over me.
Wow.
Like just anger that
Was there something that triggered you?
no, nothing
Huh.
triggered me. Nothing was like looking back, I can only just say that, man, there was some definite demonic stuff going on with me at that point because there was, even while it was happening, I was like, why do I feel this way? This makes no sense.
Yeah.
Like, I
'Cause
don't
it's an out of
understand.
the blue attack. Yeah.
Yeah, just out of nowhere.
Were you
And
reading anything or watching certain videos
probably
or
at that point, I think we talked about like I was totally loved reading like vampire books and like uh
yeah.
witch books and all that kind of, like, I was reading a bunch of crap nonfiction. Maybe at that time I wasn't. I don't know, but I had spent a lot of time prior to this reading a lot of that stuff. But yeah, I don't know what it was, but I just like this burning anger inside me that was scary. Like I was scared of the emotions that were pumping through me at this point, and I could recognize that it wasn't me.
Yeah.
Like I knew it wasn't me, and I couldn't. And I'm sitting there, and I sat through the whole service. I didn't get up and storm out or anything. Like I could control myself, but it was this just burning heat and anger that I was feeling the entire time. And I
Wow.
still got the ashes on my forehead and everything, but we left and I just told my wife, I'm like, I don't know what that was. Like that scared the living daylights out of me because that entire service I was fuming mad. Like I don't know what that was.
And that's not your normal emotions, and then
Mm-mm.
it dissipated after you
As
left.
soon as we were done, it was gone.
Yeah. It's a
And so
spiritual warfare.
totally. And even at that point, I was like, that wasn't me. Like, what is happening to me? I don't know. And I think it was shortly a few months after that, like, because we had the miscarriage was, so if that was Ash Wednesday, yeah, like it all, like all the miscarriage and my grandfather's death, all that stuff happened. This all happened within like a 3-month period of this event. So yeah, like I was, and I bring that up for later on, but it was terrifying to me. Like I was like, this is so weird. And so yeah, back fast forward, and we find this Methodist church that has 2 services every Sunday. They have like the band service that's like the, I don't know, almost like Bible church, non-denominational type service, and they have their more traditional service. So it kind of, my wife likes the more traditional. I was like, cool, I'll go to the band. Like, we could go to the same church, we could both get what we want out of it. Um, and it was a band-aid, right? Like I knew I needed to go to church, and this was just kind of a band-aid for me. Like I wasn't on fire. It was nothing like that. It was just like, okay, cool, we'll go here. This is fine. Um, and so it we were there for, that was probably 2013, I think we started going there. And the next year, um, we had our second child, my youngest, and my wife was happy. We got him baptized as an infant, because we were
Oh,
at a
because now you're
Methodist
in a
church,
Methodist church.
right? And I gave into it. I was like, fine. Um, and and so, and it's, yeah. Anyways, I won't get into the theology part that made me go, fine, okay, we can do it. But so she was really happy about that. But right before he was born, my wife had found out that the Apocrypha and the Protestant Bibles. So I always grew up thinking that Martin Luther removed the 7 books of the Bible.
It was
Like it was
later.
removed in the 1500s. It wasn't removed until the 1800s.
Yeah.
And so she was, I remember her saying like, yeah, so by like 1880, no Protestant Bibles had the Apocrypha. I'm like, hold up, that's not even like 200 years ago. Like that's really, that doesn't feel right. But then we quickly, right after we found out, I was like, I need to look into this. Well, that got thrown on the back burner, right? Like we have a new baby, we're living life. I'm traveling for work all the time. Life's looking better. Um, we had bought a new house. Like things were finally kind of on the up and up. Church is fine. And we have good friends that we've clicked with. I mean, there's still struggles in there, but it's not like it was before. And so it's 2018 now, and the Methodist conference met. So all the Methodists from all around the world meet for the conference. I feel like it's once a year. I could be wrong on that. And they vote at that point in 2018 on whether they're going to allow gay marriage and gay clergy.
Big change.
And they voted no.
Okay.
And the shocking thing for me was it was most of the international Methodist churches that weighed the vote to no, and a lot of the Methodist churches in the United States were really upset over this. Um, and so the next Sunday, we were already actually doing online service at this point, so we were ahead of the COVID curve at this church. Uh, and I just had this feeling I knew the pastor at this church was going to lead more on. He was upset that they didn't approve it. And so I was like, we're not going to go to church this Sunday. Like, let's just watch online and see what happens. And sure enough, he stands up and says he's very disappointed in the conference's voting. And he's going to lead a Bible study to show why gay marriage is biblical. And I just went, okay, yep, I'm done. Like, we're not, that's crazy. I'm not going to go to this church anymore. And so we were we'd already done we'd gone to all the different churches around town, right?
And how did your wife feel about that, leaving
She
the
was on
Methodist?
board with me too.
Yeah,
She
that
was
bothered
totally
her.
like, this is ridiculous. This is not the Methodist church I grew up in. Like we need to figure this out. And so we're not going to church anymore. So this is like December 2018, I want to say. And we had we were kind of looking at Bible churches because we knew, like, at this time, like, Presbyterian had already gone that way with doing gay marriage, and Methodists were out. We didn't really think about Anglican, and there's no way I was going to go Orthodox or Catholic. Like, that was just no, like, staunch anti-Catholic, anti-Orthodox. If anything, I might do Orthodox, but I was definitely not going to be Catholic.
Yeah.
And
God has
but
a great sense of humor.
yeah, right. It's just I got the 2x4. So we're starting 2019. I'm like, well, I'm not going to church. And we couldn't find a Bible church. Like, we were just looking up what they believe and talking to people we knew that were members there. And we're like, no, they're off the rails. They're kind of doing their cafeteria Christian thing. Like, I'm not going to these churches. Like, we both couldn't. We were like, we can't do this. So I was like, I got time. I need to look into that Bible thing that I found out about, 4 years prior. Like,
with the Apocrypha.
With the Apocrypha being removed. And so it didn't take me long to figure out that it started being removed in 1826. The Bible Society of Scotland wrote to the English Bible Society asking to stop printing the Bibles with the Apocrypha on it. And I mean, I found, because it was cheaper, is what I found out at first. I found out later from one of my buddies, a great channel on the history of the Bible, Apocrypha Apocalypse. Okay. So if you want to learn about the history of the Bible, check that channel out. But also because people were reading those books and becoming Catholic, and so.
Which is why the Jewish canon removed it after the
originally, right?
Closed, because people are reading it and it has so many references and prophetic prophecies of Jesus and his church.
Yes. And so like, I get to that point because I'm like, okay, this is crazy. So I need to research Martin Luther. Like, why did he want to remove these books? And so I'm reading a ton of stuff on Luther. And I kind of come down to like 5 basic reasons or arguments that they were removed. And the only one that would really hold water for me was Martin Luther felt that, like, the Jewish had superiority over the canon for the Old Testament, even though he hated Jews and he was totally anti-Semite. But that was one of his arguments. Well, the Torah today doesn't have those in there, so we shouldn't have them in there either. And I was like, okay, I can get on board with that if there's definite proof that their canon was closed before Christ. Like, so that makes it, like, if this was their canon before Jesus was even born, I'm game. Like, cool, I can keep being Protestant. I'm good. But it didn't. Like, they closed their canon in the 300s. And it really was solidified in the 400s or 500s. But like the official, like how they look at it today was really around 300. And like you look in Jesus's time, even when Jesus argues between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, he argues different because the Sadducees believed in only the first 5 books, the books of the law, didn't believe in the books of the prophet, where the Pharisees had a broader view. And so, like, even biblically speaking, like you could see that, oh no, the canon was not closed during Jesus's time.
Yeah. And he referenced the Septuagint.
Yeah, he does several times.
Yeah, and so
And
the
people like to say he doesn't, but like Gary Machuda is the one that owns that channel, Apocrypha Apocalypse, and he has fantastic videos where he goes through every single thing on that, where they're referencing it in the New Testament, and not just Jesus referencing it, but also other scriptures that are referencing it. Like is it in James? I think it's in one of the. I think in James they do a they reference the third Maccabees with the family that's slaughtered in third Maccabees. But anyways, so it's right at this time. My wife is doing a Bible study on the Book of John, and for Lent, and she had started listening to Father Mike Schmitz with Ascension Presents. And I would always give her a hard time because she'd listen to it while she's cooking in the kitchen, and just so it'd be on, right? And I'd come in and joke, like, "Are you watching that hot priest again?" Like, just totally giving her a hard time about it. And I was kind of getting shocked that I agreed with a lot of stuff he was saying in the videos. Like, I wasn't watching them myself, but I would hear her listening to them while she's cooking or just doing house stuff. And so she had gotten to John 6 about the same time that I had gotten to not agree with Martin Luther for removing the books. And so I knew at that point, I'm like, okay, well, it's either Orthodox or Catholic. Like, this is not good. Like, I am not happy about this, where this is leading me. And she is at John 6 and studying the Bread of Life discourse, and she finds a video on from a Father Mike Schmitz. He does a talk on it, and I can't remember what it was, but you could easily find it on YouTube. And she goes, "You have to come in here and listen to this. Have you ever heard John 6 talked about like this?" And so I'm sitting there listening to it, and I'm like, that's incredible. I've never ever heard John 6 talked in this way. Mm-hmm. And with him, and so to me, I'm like, okay, that's crazy. I'm gonna have to do my own research on this. And so I'm reading the Protestant point of view on this, the Catholic point of view on this, the Orthodox point of view on this. I'm reading, I think that's when I discovered Steve Ray was about this time. And Steve Ray does a great talk on it, and he goes into the Greek. And
he's a convert too, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a convert too. So him going through the different uses of the word eat, if you read it in Greek, was the linchpin for me, because I think it's verse 54. He changes the word. I'm not going to remember the words right now, but he goes from just the normal Greek word for eat in the previous verses, and then he goes to this word that means to devour or gnaw. So like his language gets more and more graphic as he starts saying, no, you need to eat the flesh. Yeah, he like doubles and triples down, right? And then you get to the point where like his followers leave him over this teaching, and he doesn't correct them. He's like, yeah, don't let the door hit you on the way out. This is the way it is, right?
Well, to them, they would have been so scandalized, because if it was symbolic, they would be like, okay, whatever. He speaks in parables, but he tripled down, and they had a law where they didn't consume blood, even blood and meat. So drink my blood, eat my flesh, gnaw, chew, like devour
Right. Right.
physically my
And
flesh.
even like you read in like chapter 7 starts where it says he had to flee the region because of what he said. So
It
he
would have
was
been
like,
crazy for them to
right?
hear that. Yeah.
And even me being the Protestant good Bible thumper that I was raised to be, I'm like, okay, there's got to be other references to this in the Bible. Like this doesn't like no. And so then I find 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verses, I think it starts in 27, where Paul is talking about being in a state of grace when you receive the Eucharist because it's damaging to your soul and you can die.
Yeah.
And it's a sin. And I'm like,
Mortal sin. Yeah.
right. How is it a sin if it's a symbol? Like that makes no sense if it's just a symbol and it's not the actual body and blood of Christ. How is that how is if it's just a symbol, it shouldn't be a sin no matter what state you're eating it, right? It's just to remember him, which is what I grew up believing. And so
And God's not the author of confusion. My husband and I, we just read Brent Petrie's Jewish book of the Eucharist, or the Jewish
Jewish
roots of.
roots of the Eucharist.
Oh, it
I
is
need to read all those. I keep
amazing.
hearing people mention those. I haven't read them yet.
Really, really good. Recommend it.
Yeah. So that was a kick in the gut for me because then I was like, I need to go to a church that believes this, which are only the Orthodox and only the Catholic Church.
Uh-oh.
And so I'm pretty much in a full blown panic attack at this point. And oddly enough, while this was just before all this happened, because this is Lent. So we're talking springtime. I had gone on when I started disagreeing with Luther, I had gone on a business trip to Boston, and I was going with a coworker, and I was working on this project, and we were meeting with a client, and we were driving in an Uber we had flown out there together, and we got an Uber, and we're just talking. Like I don't know her at all that well, except for meetings we'd had on the phone, and she just mentioned something she said was very Catholic-esque, right? Like I can't remember what it was, but it was something like I can't remember now. But then I was like, "Are you Catholic?" And she's like, "Yeah. I'm a cradle Catholic." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And I kind of was mentioning what I was doing at the time, and that was all the conversation was. And so, anyways, so that comes in the point later because she becomes my sponsor later to join the church.
Wow, what a small world.
Um, yeah, like just God putting people in your life at the right time.
Mhm.
And so we'd gone to, I'm really looking between the Catholic and Orthodox, and I go, okay, well, I got to figure out the papacy because that's the main difference, right? Like, so if I don't agree with the papacy, then I'm going to go Orthodox. But if the papacy is true, I got to go Catholic. And during this time, we had gone a trip out to California to go visit my family. And I kind of have a conversation with my mom about the books of the Bible and that I don't think I agree with Martin Luther. It wasn't anything deep, but I was hinting at like, this bothers me. And she brought up the 400 years of silence, which I already was like, do you know what that is?
If anyone who here hasn't heard of it, just
Okay.
discuss what it
So
is.
like the 400 years of silence argument is that basically I think it's first Maccabees, they talk about like, oh, we'll set this aside until I think it's some old when they reclaim the temple, we'll set this aside until a prophet comes to tell us what to do with it. And they take that verse as God didn't speak to the Israelites until Christ came or until John the Baptist. And so there's 400 years of silence. So when Tobit was written during that period of time, wisdom was written during that period of time. Like, so that's why these books don't need to be in there. But that doesn't make any sense if you just read the presentation at the temple, because there's the prophetess Anne that's there. And there's also a prophet Simeon that's there that was told by God that he would live to see the Christ.
Yeah. People,
right?
and Zechariah, he was visited by an angel, and it wasn't uncommon. It was still happening.
Right. The
Could
major
I
and minor
start?
prophet area was done, but God wasn't being silent.
No,
And I think
and
those
still
verses
today,
prove
he
that.
still talks. Yeah.
So like to me, it's a total straw man weak argument to say that those books don't need to be in there. But that's what my mom was mentioning.
Do
And
you
I'd
mind
already
if
done
I asked? You had mentioned Luther with oh, I call them Deuter Chronicles, but
right.
what about the books he wanted to remove from the New Testament?
Like James
Revelation,
in
James,
Revelations.
Second Peter.
Yeah, Protestants don't know that. A lot of Protestants don't understand that he wanted to remove James because it says faith without works is dead. It totally went against his faith alone argument. So, yeah, he wanted to remove James, and I think his followers, his other priests that had left the Catholic Church with him, were like, "Dude, no, you can't touch the New Testament. I'm sorry, like those have to stay in the Bible." We're with you on the Deuterocal. I can't talk today. The Apocrypha stuff, but we're not doing that. And so that's why I think he basically just got peer pressured into keeping him in there. Like if he had his way, he would have removed him.
Yeah,
But
there's a
yeah,
bunch
so
of
but so anyway, so I'm studying this, and I think what there were several books in the Bible that are passages that completely clicked with me, and like, no, the papacy's real. When you look at Matthew 16:18, and he talks about when Peter got the keys, and you read Isaiah 22:22, and it's talking about the chief steward of the kingdom of David receiving the keys, and any door he opens shall be open, and any door he shuts shall be shut. It's like the same language, and this idea that the kingdom of heaven is built off, modeled after the kingdom of David. And so you have the representatives of the 12 tribes, and you have a king, which is Christ. And then out of those 12 tribes, you'll have the chief steward that will run the kingdom while the king is gone. And he would receive the keys of the kingdom. Like that just made perfect sense to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like all
It's
of this.
very coherent, and the typology,
Yes.
once you start reading it through a lens of typology, it makes
Yeah.
a
And
lot more
even
sense.
Mary being the queen of heaven, like the mother of the king of Israel was the queen, not his spouse, because he had several and it was crazy. But but yeah, so all that stuff, it just clicked, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the papacy's real. And
Did you read any early church fathers or
oh
anything
yeah,
else to help
it
you come to
was
that
Ignatius of
conclusion?
Antioch. How did I miss that part? Because after it was right after that, the not agreeing with Martin Luther and learning about the Eucharist, I was like, I need to learn. I need to read the early church fathers, because I never ever, even in my Bible class I took in college, we never talked about any of that stuff. And so I went to like a Protestant Bible store and bought. I still have it. The worst book ever, church history. And the funny thing is, I just picked it up, and it's actually a textbook for studying preachers that was written by a professor at my alma mater. So I was just kind of laughing at it because at this point I had done academic research. And so a lot of the research that I had done, I would use my textbooks to find out who created the original theory, then look up that work, and then look up who they're quoting it from to try and get down to the original source.
Like the references.
Right. So I look at the references, and then, oh, that's not where it came from. They're referencing somebody else. So I need to go back even further. And so I was hoping that is what this church history textbook was going to do for me. Right. Like I'll use the textbook. I'll just do the research like I did when I wrote my thesis. Like, and I'll just go deep and keep going back until I get to the original source. Well, he has zero references in there, like
Oh.
none at all. So it's all opinion. Like he doesn't reference anything. Like there's just one part where he's kind of disputing the papacy, and I started laughing when I read it because it's like there's really no evidence that we don't really know who was head over the church in Rome, whether it was Paul or Peter, because they were both there at the same time. And I'm just like, Okay, dude, like that's you're jumping the shark here on this one. But the good thing out of that book is I got a list of names of the church fathers. And so
So
then
who
I
was
read
it?
Ignatius, and then
Ignatius.
Ignatius even like slammed the door shut on the Eucharist with his quote of like, if they don't believe in, like, I'm total paraphrasing this. I got called out on my channel one time because I paraphrased it too strongly. But he basically says, if you don't believe it's the body and blood of Christ, you're not a Christian and don't associate with those people. And then I
Hmm.
read
And who is
first.
Ignatius? Just for the
So
listeners.
Ignatius was the bishop of Antioch, where Christians were first called Christians, and he was a student of Colly.
Polycarp.
Thank you. And but he also knew John because Polycarp was taught by John,
And
and
wasn't he
so
ordained by Peter? Or
yes, and he was also ordained by Peter. So this dude has good street cred, right? Like if he's getting it wrong, the apostles are awful at their job.
yeah,
So
he's one of their
like
besties.
right. And then I read First Clement, who's mentioned in the Bible also, Clement, who's the fourth pope, the successor, and that letter is just eye opening, right? And when for those who don't know what that letter is, basically the Church of Corinth, which once again is shooting themselves in the foot, like you already had two letters from Paul. Like you still need the Pope to write you again after Paul's gone because you still can't get your stuff together. Uh, so, but the crazy thing is, so this is like in 70 AD, 90 AD. They think it's somewhere in there, maybe even as early as 65. Um, they they write to Rome on what to do because they had kicked out their priest and bishop because they
Hmm.
were fighting within the church. And to me at the time, I'm like, John's still alive,
Yeah.
and John's closer. Like he's over in I think at this point he was on that island, right? But
Yeah.
they know John, they would know where John is. Why don't you write to John? Like he's down the street, not to Rome, which is way farther away.
And
And
expensive and dangerous and
right,
those times to carry
right.
letters.
This is like during Nero. Yeah, I think so. Either during or right after Nero, right? Like so it's not a like it's very dangerous to write to Rome. And because like in my Protestant mind, I'm like, well, there'd be the first Church of Corinth and the second Church of Corinth, right? Like we just split and be like, whatever, we're doing our own thing.
Denominations.
Right. But so when they get the letter, when they get the first Clement, the letter of First Clement, they listen to him and they reunite. And it's all about church authority, and it's all about the apostolic seed and passing down authority.
Obedience.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy reading all this stuff. And part of me was hoping, and I remember saying this, like I'm hoping I'm going to read the church fathers and see the Church of Christ that I grew up with. Because remember what I said earlier, that they believe that they
They
were
believe they
acting
were the first church because
right.
it started in the
So I
18th.
should see no church authority. I should see the communion's just a symbol. I should
What was
see
your communion? Was it wine or?
no, it was grape juice and crackers.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't wine. No, so they're against drinking, and some are against dancing. But anyways, it depends on where you go, right? There's no connection, so it depends on how hardcore you want to go. So yeah, I was shocked reading and to my core, like I was really, really upset about this. But the truth was leading me to the Catholic Church.
Was that the 2x4 you were talking about?
Yes, it 100% was. And so I remember coming out of my office. My wife's in the kitchen. I don't know if she was listening to Father Mike Schmidt at this point. Like she might have been, probably was. But I come out and I go, I think we need to join the Catholic Church. And so this is June, July 2019. So all of this stuff has
Yeah,
happened
it
in
was just
6
a few
months.
months of research.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's all I was doing in my spare time. I wasn't playing video games. I wasn't doing anything else. I was just researching the heck out of everything. I was acting like I was writing a thesis. And so she kind of goes, okay, well, why don't we go to a mass and just see what we think? And at this point, I had gone to a wedding mass, which I didn't understand that it was a mass because I think my wife and I were dating. We weren't even married at this or even engaged. And her best friend was Catholic and got married. So I went to their wedding, but I had no idea it was a mass. It didn't click with me. And then I have a family on my dad's side that's Catholic. But they're like second and third cousins. Like my great aunt. My great aunt was Catholic. And so I went to her funeral. And that was an interesting experience, but I didn't take anything away from it, right? Like I was going to pay respects to my great aunt. It wasn't
Mhm.
anything more than that. And
So
yeah,
this is kind of your first time with new eyes, fresh new eyes going.
yes. And so I'm terrified because of that experience at the Anglican Church 10 years ago, or however long ago that was.
You
7 years ago.
the one
I'm
where you're really angry and filled with rage.
Yes. I am so scared that I'm going to walk into this church building and feel that again. And then I don't know what I'm going to do because I think this is where I need to be. Like I've convinced myself intellectually, but I need to feel it. And so we decide to go to a Saturday evening mass. We're like, oh, it won't be crowded. It was totally crowded.
They're
But it's
busy.
a Novus Ordo mass. Like, of course, I didn't know the difference, right? To me, like Novus Ordo seemed like the Latin mass. Like it was just so different than anything I'd experienced before. Um, and I remember going in, and we sat towards the back. Obviously, I'm obviously never in sync with anybody doing anything because I'm watching people. Like, oh, okay, I got to stand up. Okay, I got to sit down. Oh, I got to kneel. Like, I have no idea what's going on. But I had never been to a church service before and felt that much peace.
Amazing.
And it was just an overwhelming peace. And so I knew I like, this is it. This is what we have to do. And so, yeah, so we joined RCIA, had to go through the whole process. We had to go through an annulment process, which meant like my oldest son got to be baptized and confirmed and have first communion
Before you.
before we did. And so he got to do that in 2020, where I had to wait till Pentecost 2021 to join. And so, yeah, it was crazy. It was a mind-blowing experience. And I'm just so grateful that I'm Catholic today. Like every time we go to mass, I'm just like, thank you, Lord, that you're letting me be here, that you led me here.
Yeah.
Despite all of my negative feelings towards Catholics, that I'm now consider myself Catholic and I am part of the Catholic Church.
And you even create YouTube content for it too, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. So when you had been receiving communion for most of your life in a different denomination, what was the difference for you when you received it that first time?
I don't know if I necessarily I was emotional the first time, not overly emotional, but I knew what I was consuming. I knew that I was consuming the body and blood of Christ. This was no longer just a cracker and Wrigley's grape juice.
Much deeper.
And it was definitely a big deal because to wait 2 years, right? Like we started going to Catholic Mass in July of 2019, and I couldn't receive until till Pentecost 2021. To go that long of a period of time, and we had COVID and lockdowns, right? So we were watching Mass online. Like it was awful, but
You have
we
like a
all went through that.
hunger for it that's growing, but it also tests your faith. It tests like perseverance.
Yes, and it
And
wasn't easy joining. Like for us having to go through that annulment process with my wife, like it wasn't an easy process to go through.
They take
Um,
marriage very seriously.
they do. And I think that was a testament to the Catholic faith too, because there's so many, like, even I know plenty of people that are Church of Christ that have gotten divorced, right? Like they'll look down on it. They don't, like we don't get divorced, but they do. And it's like, okay, well, you might have to move churches now because you got divorced. But I know plenty of people that happened to. So even preachers, I know two that got divorced that were Church of Christ preachers. So um yeah, I think it was awesome. And I just feel so blessed that every time I get to receive Holy Communion. And yeah, it was definitely the life-changing. It's just amazing to be able to participate in the sacraments. First confession, that was fun.
What was that like, your first confession? Because you were an
Scary
adult.
and nerve-wracking. Because I mean, you're thinking, like, I know when you had your reversion, and I'm gonna have her for everyone. I interviewed her right before this, so we've been talking for over 2 hours now. So, but like, you had a number of years to confess there, right? But I was 40. So I'm thinking back to all the stupid stuff we talked about that I was doing in high school. I mean, and it was funny too, because I'm totally the, like, I got to dive in. Like, I can't just like dip my toe in. If I'm going to do something and I'm scared to do it, I know I have to like run full speed. It's like, when you're jumping in cold water, like,
Yeah.
don't wade in. You got to get a running start and dive in.
Yeah.
So, when I went to my first confession, I literally, like, you had the option to sit behind the veil or sit in front of the priest. I was
Oh,
like,
you
nope,
went hardcore.
I'm sitting in front of him. And so, yeah, it was, but I remember walking out afterwards and just feeling this weight lifted off my chest. Like, it felt amazing. I was just like, this, oh my gosh, I understand why this is the sacrament of penance. Like, this is unbelievable. And to verbally, even though we know it is through the power of Christ that priests are able to forgive our sins, it's still Christ forgiving our sins. But to confess your sins out loud to another human being, your deepest, darkest, scariest things that, like, nobody else except you know about,
Yeah.
there's something that just, like, changes you when you have to do that. And it's beautiful. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it
there's such
was.
a veil of safety too, because priests would rather die and go to prison than break that
And they
seal.
have over and over and over again.
Yeah, all throughout history. And
Yeah.
uh, yeah, that's amazing. So you're a father and a husband. How has your call for these vocations changed as you've deepened your faith?
I know it's made me a better husband and father. Um, I'm, I feel more engaged with my kids than I did before. Um, I know we haven't talked about on this, but I know we talked about a little bit when I was talking with you, like with my wife's health issues. I'm more caring and considerate with her now. Um, I'm easily, like, if I don't check myself, I can be very selfish. And I didn't really get that until I became Catholic. And I think it's like the Lord's revealed that in me, that, like, hey, stop it, you selfish idiot. And so it's made me be more considerate and caring, and really taking the lead as the spiritual father of the house. Because there was definitely years there where I let my wife take the lead, and I was like, whatever, I don't care. And so now, like, I take that very seriously. So, um, yeah, I think it's just made me a better man overall, period, than I
Yeah.
was before. I'm ashamed of the dude I was before. Like, I think back and I'm like, what a jerk. So, yeah,
And it's really great. Like it's so sanctifying. The prayers, the sacraments, it really does change the soul, and it
hmm
helps us get rid of the old man and merge into the new man who God created us to walk in.
yeah.
And It's a
Yeah, and
lot
I
of
think it's interesting the changes you go through, but the what I think naturally it makes you understand purgatory a little bit better too,
yeah,
because even though I am changed, I know I'm different. Like I am different, but you still feel the scars of your past sins. Like I know I'm forgiven, but I'm still feel that attachment. I still feel, like you can feel it and you're like, "Oh, that's the old me. That's not me anymore. I'm not that person."
yeah.
And so I think it's just, I don't know, it's just all beautiful. It's all just so perfectly, God created a perfect church and he created the perfect sacraments to help us in our journey of faith and to be sanctified. And it's just awesome.
How has your family responded to this? Because it can be quite a shocker for many and
Not
you don't need to
not
speak
good.
to it if you don't
No,
feel
I did a whole video on this. So not great. I think when so we were already 5, 6 months into RCIA before I even told my mom that we were going to a Catholic church. I think she just thought I wasn't going to church at all. And I had waited until I felt confident in all the apologetic arguments to have the conversation with my parents on this because they were mad that I started the Methodist church. And my mom and grandma and aunt kind of bombarded me one night. Like I went to go visit them with my oldest son, and we were playing cars, and they just laid into me about being Methodist. And so I was like, I am not going to go into that situation again and not have my ducks in a row and understand exactly what I believe, why I believe it, and everything. And so when I told her, I was like, yeah, so we're doing RCIA, we're going to become Catholic. And her first response was a pedophile priest joke.
well,
And I
that's
was
how
like,
media's groomed us. The percentage is actually
it's better
like
than public schools by a
and
massive margin. Like
yeah,
it's
but
crazy.
still
But
wrong. There's been a lot of infiltration in
oh yeah,
media,
but
but
but it was kind of hurtful. That was her first response. And
yeah.
then she was like, well, at least you're going to church, was like her concession on that. And then my grandparents, that my grandfathers, they're still alive. They're 90 and 89. Um, but I didn't, my nana would call me all the time or text me and be like, hey, would you go to church? I'm like, yeah, we went to church. Where are you going? And I would just say the name of the church, like, oh, we used to go to St. Jude. And I'm like, yeah, we went, where do you go? I'm like, I tell them, but I would leave out
You wouldn't say
Catholic
Catholic.
church.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, if they want to Google it, they can Google it and find out themselves. But I was like, I don't want to have this argument with my grandparents. And I was chickening out a little bit too. But somebody told her at one point, I don't know when, this was like a few years ago when this happened. And, and she texted me and she's like, my whole family called me Kyle. And she's like, Kyle, I heard something that was awful, that you're Catholic now. It's like, oh, great. So I text her back and I said, yeah, we joined the Catholic Church a few years ago. And she replied back, I'm sorry you've given up on God and you're doing this to your kids.
Oh, that's a strong statement.
Yeah. And then she said, you know what the Bible says about communion? And I said, yeah, that's why I'm Catholic. Is my response back to her. And she's like, your granddad's going to call you in a little bit. It's like, oh, great. And so, yeah, my grandfather calls, and it was a good conversation. Like he's old now, right? So he's not as sharp as I would have loved to have had this conversation 10 years prior. Um, but I don't think that he was expecting me to have solid theological arguments for the Catholic faith.
Mhm.
And so we talked for 30, 40 minutes. But it wasn't like he was throwing down hard arguments on anything. But so yeah, that's kind of where it stands. Like my mom's still not happy about it. They came to visit us last year and I'm like, y'all should come to mass with us tomorrow. And they're like, yeah, nope. And so, and the whole time they were here, both my parents were like kind of making fun of Catholics the whole time that they were here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it hasn't been easy at all.
No.
So, but Christ did say that he came to bring a sword and not peace, and that you know daughters were going to be against mothers, and sons against dad and fathers, and it's a thing, and I'm experiencing it, but it doesn't shake me at all. I still feel like I'm honoring my father and mother because I've followed the truth, and I'm extremely serious about my faith. So
Yeah. And sometimes it plants a seed too. Like, okay, what does he actually believe? And
yeah.
then people inquiring about their own faith. I think in Protestantism, there's a deconstruction movement where a lot of people are questioning. And what I like about the Catholic Church is that there's an answer for everything and it's very coherent and it doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
And at least people are questioning a little bit, but it is a cross that you're bearing, but hopefully sprinkling little seeds.
Yeah, it is what it is, and I'm okay with it now. I mean, it'd be great if they would actually ask me legitimate questions instead of just badmouth it. So,
Yeah.
I'm
The
here if they ever want
diversions
to
and
have that
conversions don't
conversation.
come from within family.
No,
Jesus
no.
said you can't be a prophet at home. So,
Yep. Yeah. So if they ever want to have the conversation, I'm totally open for it. But I realized pretty quickly when they were here that it's like, nope,
not that.
they're not even listening to anything I'm saying, and so I just kind of went, yeah, I'm done.
I have another question. How did you feel or how did you react when you realized Mass or the Divine Liturgy is biblical? Like it's almost
I
all
was
scripture.
excited. I was super excited, and
That's a shocker for some people.
especially like everything in Mass is biblically based. Even the procession, it's Christ going to the cross. It's Christ going to Calvary. That's what it is, And so yeah, all of it, it was awesome, And we do more scripture reading in Mass than Protestant churches do. Sorry, Protestants, if you're watching, but your preacher might read you a few little paragraphs, but we're reading Old Testament, the Psalms. We're going to be reading.
I think he came off.
My child just sorry guys, I'm getting interrupted.
So we can.
My yeah, like you go Psalms, Old Testament, New Testament, Gospels. So like we get a lot in Mass, and where typically the only time the Bible's read in Protestant churches during the sermon. So he'll be preaching on a section of the New Testament or Old Testament.
Yeah.
And so you just get a little section there, and they basically have a Bible study for a sermon.
Here you have the entire Bible read to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Divine Office is really beautiful too. The readings throughout the day.
All the prayers are all biblically based, are from Scripture. I mean, I think the one that just strikes me every single Sunday is, Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter that you should enter under my roof to just say the words and my soul shall be healed. Like that gets me every single Mass.
Yeah.
Like it just every time. Like I don't think I've been to Mass once and said that and been like, wow, that is powerful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to let you go to your son who's eager
Yeah.
to hang out with his dad. So.
Yep. He's like, it's been forever. So, no, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you so much for having me on. I really do appreciate it. And I can't wait to see what your channel does. So yeah, I totally appreciate it.
All right. God bless you and your family.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, cool. So let's see here. I'm going to stop the recording.